saying, though.
Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Dr. Marsha Carter McLean, and this show is called the 2.0 Grandma Podcast. Now, I like to say this show is fab because it's for grandmas, about grandmas, and by a grandma. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Aaron Larsen, who is the founder of Grandparents Academy. Grandmas, I bet you didn't know that we needed an academy to teach us how to be a grandparent, did you? I am so delighted that Aaron is here, and I can't wait for him to share the wonderful things that he's doing in the grandparents. I call it the grandparents realm because there is so much going on with grandparents now. My program is just about grandmas, and I wanted him to come on and share with us because this is something that you need to know about. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. Aaron, I want you to kind of tell us all about who you are, and then I want us to jump into your platform. Okay? So tell us,
Wonderful.
who is Aaron Larsen?
Thank you so much, Dr. Marsha, and for having me on the show. I am so excited to be here, and clearly, as everyone can see, I am not a grandma, but I had some amazing grandmas in my life just growing up as a kid, and some of them are still around with me. In fact, I just got off the phone with one of them who's turning 95 this year, and
Wow.
I get the opportunity to see her tomorrow and stay with her. And help her figure out how to get PBS to work again on her iPad. So it's
Oh,
going to be a lot of fun. We enjoy our time together. So
make sure you tune her into your podcast so she can hear what you're doing. Okay. I mean, I'm sure
absolutely.
she knows all the wonderful things that you're doing, but I want her to hear it as a grandma from the grandma's perspective. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple grandmas specifically who really influenced my life, and one of them is Grandma Grace, who I just mentioned. She's more your traditional grandma. She raised four kids, adopted them, and she was always kind of behind the scenes and making sure we were taken care of with our grilled cheese and our our soda pop, and after we got done going to the movies with Grandpa. So she was kind of in the background, but I had the opportunity to live with her after college. I graduated in 2008, and I was the recession happened, and I was like magna cum laude and magna cum jobless after
I love that magna
going
cum
to this
job.
private school. So I moved in with my grandma. A lot of my friends went to grad school, and I went to grand school, and it ended up being one of the biggest blessings of my life. Really, was living with her for a year, teaching her how to use Facebook to connect with her family and other things. And then she taught me a lot about faith and some of the more important character values and characteristics in life that we use. That I was so busy in high school. There's so much stuff going on, and I feel like even nowadays there's a lot of pressure on kids in school to get the best grades and to be
Mm-hmm,
part of four
mm-hmm,
different
mm-hmm.
sports and also be part of choir and all the extracurriculars so you can get a scholarship and go to college. So that was the model back then, and I feel like it's changing. That's a whole nother
Yes, it is.
discussion.
That's a whole nother
A whole nother
podcast,
discussion.
right?
Yeah, but the bottom line is I was so busy and focused on those things. I wasn't focused in on some of the really important things in life that really mattered. And my grandma helped to give me the perspective I needed in a dark time in my life where I was just kind of figuring out, what do I do next? I mean, I
Mm-hmm,
thought I did
mm-hmm.
everything right, and now I have no idea what my future looks like, but I do know that the student loan payments are due here pretty
Right.
soon.
Real
So,
soon.
I better figure this out, right?
Right.
So, live with grandma, and then after that, I lived with another set of grandparents to help be more of a caregiver for my grandpa,
Oh.
and I call them Granny Grit and Grandpa Grit, and they live out in the country, very different from Grandma Grace.
Uh-huh.
Granny Grit's a pioneer woman. She is like, if you don't want to cross Granny Grit, like she will, like the horses get afraid of Granny Grit's because she
That's
has
right.
elbows like daggers, and she will kick
Uh-huh.
butt, and she's not afraid to do it, right? So you don't want to steal the cookie dough. I mean, that's
Right.
one thing you always learn about her. Anyway, so I was caregiving for my grandpa, and same sort of thing. Through that experience, I learned how to garden. I learned more about my own personal worth and the value of courage and perseverance. helping through this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to just kind of be there and help out. And so for those 4 years of life, I gained this perspective. I think that a lot of people don't get that perspective until later in life. And so I was blessed in that way. And I decided, with all of this, I wanted to create something that would help other grandparents connect with their grandchildren and develop a relationship in a similar way that I had developed relationships with my grandparents. And
Mm.
that was Grandparents Academy.
That's a beautiful story, Aaron, because a lot of children don't get the opportunity like you had. It was a
Mm.
golden opportunity, and not
Yeah.
golden because of the age, but golden because of all the lessons
Yeah.
that you learned, during that time. Children who may not be reared by their grandparents never really know or ever really know them, and you
Mhm.
got to know them, like almost like parents.
Yeah.
There is definitely a difference. And you made me think about what I've learned from my grandma. My
Mm.
grandma was a go-getter. She was a businesswoman, business-minded woman early on, when at a time when a lot of grandmas, a lot of women in general, were not pursuing entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
She did something, I call it an apprenticeship. She went to South Carolina to live with to learn how to operate her own hotel, if you will. And
Mhm.
back then, like today, it would be like a bed and breakfast, because they were like, if I recall, there were like 10 beds in the place, and then she made the food for every meal, and then she had a restaurant, and so during the summers I would go down there and stay with her, and I work. So I learned
Mm.
my work ethic from her.
Yeah.
And people always say to me, boy, you do a lot. But it's because, when here's what she did as a grandma. She she had us working in her place, making beds, working behind the counter, like selling sodas, ice cream, that kind of stuff. And then she said, and my reason for doing it, she said, oh, I will buy your school clothes. Well, I went to Catholic school as a kid, so I always had to wear uniform, so I always
Mhm.
wanted clothes like the other kids, right? and
Mm. Yeah.
so and so when she said, the thing that intrigued me was, I'll buy you school clothes. Well, guess what? She did not buy school clothes. She said, well, I'm taking care of you. I'm putting a roof. I'm like, so I had to get another job in order to get money to get my school clothes. So therefore, I've always had at least a job, and, as they say now, a side hustle, because
Right.
because of her. And so I said, I learned my work ethic from her. And
Mm.
I've always had some kind of entrepreneur side to me as well. And I learned that from her. So
Yeah.
it's really intriguing, the things that we learn from our grandparents that maybe we don't know. But I spent
Yeah.
that time, like you, I spent that time with her during the summers, like sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, until I got ninth grade. And then I could go and get a real job, unquote, And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. But I learned quite a bit. So I feel you on that. I understand, because I've been there. So
Well,
but I love that you said, instead of going to grad school like your friends, you went to
yeah.
grand school. I love that. That was
Yeah,
so
well, I just
funny.
figured I had racked up enough debt at that point, and I better find another path. But
Right.
you're so right like, with your example of your
Mhm,
grandma and
mhm,
the way that she involved you in the process, and it inspired you. And I think,
mhm.
although the world has changed in so many different ways, some of the things remain the same in terms of the power of a grandparent when they're
Yes.
intentional, and when they involve their grandchildren. You don't have to sacrifice, your grandma. Now you don't have to like put away everything and succumb to traditional standards of being a grandma. Like you're totally, you're advocating the opposite of that, which is really, become who you were meant to be,
Exactly.
and don't sacrifice all of that when you don't have to. And
Right.
this is a perfect example of how, in your case, your grandma was still an entrepreneur. She accomplished some amazing things, but she involved you in it. So
Mhm,
she didn't
mhm,
have to feel like she was, trading one thing for the other. It's,
mhm.
let's bring the grandchildren in with us as we're doing this
Exactly.
together, right?
Exactly. And that made a difference, because sometimes as children, parents will, and I grew up in the area where do as I say, not as I
Mm.
do,
Mhm.
and children are to be seen and not heard, you know, uh, Yeah, that thing. So seen and not heard. So in other words, you didn't have an
Mhm.
opinion. You couldn't
Yeah.
have an opinion about anything. If you did, you better keep it to yourself, kind of thing, right? And no
Right.
one ever asks you your opinion.
Mhm.
But with having that experience with my grandma, and because grandparents are different from parents, you get a chance to say some of the things, and they want to know. Like, and because of that her my relationship with her also impacted my relationship with my own grandchildren and how I
Mm.
connect with them. And I try to get them to do kind of entrepreneur things. I got one little granddaughter who is now, as we speak, in another city doing, she's selling slime. She created slime. She created her own business.
Oh,
And that's
cool.
what she does. So I mean, it's phenomenal. And I say,
Yeah.
and I always laugh about it because I say, and she started this at, like, she's 10 now. She started last year. So I say she's just like my grandma was. She's an entrepreneur minded, but she just started hers much earlier than the rest of us. So
I
it
love
really
it.
has a lasting impact. And I
Mhm.
think that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. It has a lasting impact.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
My, so Granny Grit, she's also a gardener, and
Uh,
I discovered after living with her that she was entrepreneurial and that she would have, her own plant sales, and
huh.
she would sell salsa, and she kinda, after a while, she moved to the country and kinda got busy with things, and she didn't make salsa. Well, she made it for their family, but it wasn't really, a big thing anymore. I started living with her, and I'm like, "Can we make that salsa? Can you show me how to make that salsa?" Because
Mm,
it was that's the best salsa ever. So
mm,
so she involved me, and she showed me how to, like, we grow the seeds together. Like, we put together hundreds of seeds just a few weeks ago in preparation for this season. And every
mm.
year we have what's called Salsa Day, and we get together and we make this salsa
Oh,
in the
wow.
middle of
Salsa
August.
day.
And so when we talk about lasting impact and we talk about
Yes.
legacy, right? This it is salsa. It's a food product, but it's not the product. It's the process that
Yes.
matters most to me, right? And the time that we've spent in the garden, and we've gotten dirty and built the garden beds and planted the seeds and everything leading up to that. People ask me, when do you start making salsa? And I say, well, it starts in January, because that's when we get the
Mm,
seed catalog, and we're looking at,
hmm.
like, what do we plant this year? What worked, what didn't? And we're getting things prepared. So I often, from that experience, what I learned was, people are similar to gardening in the way, in relationships, in that way. Like, if we want to have a lasting relationship and a rich legacy and an impact in our loved ones, we involve them in the process, or intentional in it, and it takes a lot longer than what we're used to in this kind of McMoment society, where we have
Mhm,
instant
mhm.
gratification all the time.
Yes, yes,
What really matters takes longer, but it's better in the end, right?
yes, in the end,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's something that we say in my field, which is teacher education. And
Mhm.
I talk about with teachers how to engage and interact with children. And what's so important is the relationship.
Yes.
With the relationship, if you build a relationship, the learning will come in that process. But
Mhm.
but first you have to build that relationship. And so yeah, that's very similar to what we say too. Oh, that's interesting that we have these
Yeah.
things in common that I didn't know
Yeah.
about. So
Yeah.
okay, so now I want to hear about the platform. I cannot wait for people
Okay.
to hear about that. But we have
Yeah.
to take a little quick break now.
Okay.
And so when we come back, then we'll talk about the platform. Okay?
Great.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
All right. So, Aaron, tell us how you came up with this ingenious idea. It is absolutely a phenomenal idea. So, please
Uh,
share with us how you came up with that idea.
Thank you so much. Well, like I said before, I was really blessed with some amazing grandparents who were intentional in my life, and with all of them, it's always centered around education. In that, if we want to learn to get better at something, if we want to enjoy life at a deeper level, really is what